By the end of the 1980s, Princess Diana and Prince Charles led separate lives. He spent much of his time with Camilla Parker Bowles. She had recently ended a 3-year love affair with Army officer James Hewitt. Only a handful of people knew about the breakdown of the royal marriage. For years they had kept it secret, but details would soon appear in newspapers, shaking the royal family to the core.
It has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
Diana was a single woman in all but name. Her days were filled with royal duties, usually separate from her husband. In the autumn of 1989, she began a new relationship. Within weeks, news of it reached the news desk of The Sun. A man had a tape of a conversation that he wanted to sell. The deputy editor arranged to meet him in a station car park.
He came and sat in our car, we put the cassette in and listened to it, almost mesmerised for 20 minutes or so.
It's just so difficult, so complicated. It makes my life real torture.
To my view, it was clearly her. We had no idea who the man was, and the content was absolutely explosive.
Sad and full of empty. I thought, bloody hell, what I done for this fucking family.
Eventually, we managed to pin down that the man who was constantly referred to as James on the tape was James Gilby.
You're just the nicest person in the whole world.
James Gilby of the Gilby Gin family had been one of Diana's teenage boyfriends.
We went to his house early one morning and told him, we've got a tape which we believe contains private conversation between you and the Princess of Wales, in which you repeatedly had called her Squidgy, and it's a fairly intimate conversation, at which point he went completely white, got in his car and drove off.
The Sun decided that the story was too explosive to print and locked the tape in a safe. But Diana soon learned about it and the threat it posed to her public image. She broke contact with Gilby and within a few weeks was back in touch with James Hewitt. He was now commanding a squadron of tanks and had just been ordered to the Gulf, where war was looming.
I was in Germany, and she suddenly rang me out of the blue. She was wondering whether I was going to the Gulf, and so I said yes, I was. And she said she'd like to see me before I went out there. So I went and saw her at Highgrove, and I stayed the night there. So we took up really where we left off, without an if and a but. And then this amazing affair was rekindled, really.
Diana also re-established contact with James Hewitt's family.
I hadn't seen him for several months, and as he was coming back to be at Highgrove with Diana, she said, well, let's have Mother up. And we had a wonderful weekend. It was so nice to be with them. And the boys appeared in their pyjamas and their dressing gowns, and William actually brought supper in on the tray for us.
The Hewitts discovered that Diana had made a big decision.
I know that Diana did not want to be Queen of England. I will never be Queen. She was quite determined. She wanted to get out of the marriage. So for that reason alone, she had no desire to be Queen.
She didn't want the artificialness of what she seemed would be inevitable were she to become Queen. I think she wanted to remain herself.
Diana began to plan an end to her marriage. Her first step concerned money. I was introduced to Princess Diana in 1990 by one of her close friends who I'd done very well for financially. And she said she wanted me to look after her financial affairs. She wanted to leave the royal family. She wanted to leave their advisors. She wanted to set up on her own. She was thinking of possibly remarrying, moving abroad, maybe having a couple of children. She wanted to have a new life.
When I went to the desert, the affair was conducted with veracity, if you like. The nature of the veracity was the amount of correspondence and depth of feeling that was being transferred between us. She wrote to me every day I was out there, sometimes twice a day.
James Hewitt's letters were sent to Diana via his mother.
On one occasion, she I don't know why, there'd probably been a hold-up with the mail. I think she probably hadn't heard for a couple of days. And she rang me and I said, yes, I said, letters came this morning. Oh, please, will you read it to me? Will you read them to me? I said, I can't do that. I can't. They're your letters. Please, please, please. She pleaded with me to read these letters, and so I duly opened them and read them to her. And she was happy, and she said, now, please, will you post them today? I said, of course I will.
Back in London, Diana's correspondence caused concern. A senior member of the royal household spoke to her about it. He told this programme,
I said to her that it wasn't a good idea to write letters to James Hewitt. She got upset and cross.
Diana visited the Hewitt family home in Devon.
Sometimes, if she couldn't stand the stress anymore, she would leap into a car, sometimes accompanied by her sons, or either one or the other, and she would drive down just for the day, and obviously it helped.
She sent me bottles of whiskey and hampers from Fortnum and Mason, which was well received and shared amongst my men. And she sent out a parcel of Playboy magazines. They were hugely appreciated.
Throughout this period, whatever her private anxieties, Diana kept up appearances. On a trip to a hospital in Nottingham, she bumped into the family of Dean Woodward, who was in a coma.
Dean's mum said, well, my son's in intensive care, and Diana said, do you mind if I come in? And Dean's mum says, no, not at all. And yeah, you say, I was in a state of shock anyway myself. When she walked in, I was like, oh my God.
How can you feel? Why would somebody like that come to see somebody like me, come to see Joe Public?
Soon after Dean Woodward recovered consciousness, he got a surprise.
The receptionist came out and she said, Dean, there's a phone call for you. I said, who is it? She said, it's Diane. And I've got a sister, Diane. And I said, oh, tell her I'm having my dinner to call back later. She went away, come back. She said, oh, she can't call back. So I went in, stopped my dinner, went and spoke on the phone. And then I said, oh, hello, my duck, because I had a tracheotomy, I could talk then. And then she said, do you know who you're talking to? I said, yeah, Diane. And she said, no, you're talking to Princess Diana from Kensington Palace. Unbelievable.
In February 1991, James Hewitt led 15 British tanks into battle. For his courage under fire, he was mentioned in dispatches. He was also mentioned in the news of the world.
The first I knew about it was, somebody handing it to me and saying, look at this. And I said, oh my goodness.
These were the first details of Diana's love life to be printed in a national newspaper, although the paper only hinted at the extent of her relationship with Hewitt.
I used the army phone to ring her up. She said, don't worry. I said, don't worry. I mean, it's easier said than done. As soon as I got back, I went and saw her, went and stayed. And we didn't really sort of speak too much about it. There was too much else to catch up on.
After the news of the world scoop, Hewitt's every step was dogged by reporters. Privacy with Diana was impossible.
Publicity killed the relationship. It was impossible to carry on as we had been in that environment. I tried to contact her, and then, you know, as soon as I realised my calls weren't being returned, you know, I knew, you know, I'd been there before, so it was plain to see.
Diana now faced the risk that 2 damaging stories about her could be printed. More details of her affair with Hewitt and the tape of her conversation with James Gilby. She set out to tell the world a different story and put her version of her marriage on the record first.
She planned it, but she wanted to look as if she was the goodie and the royal family were the baddies.
To tell the world her story, Diana turned to a journalist she'd been on friendly terms with for years.
I vividly remember the first time Diana and Andrew Morton met. It was at a cocktail party, I think in Spain or somewhere like that. And Diana immediately seemed to be interested in him. She was toying with his tie and making comments about what a bright pattern it was. From then on, Andrew always wore loudly patterned ties.
At these receptions, it was all lively, joshing and very friendly.
But it gave her an excuse to get close to him. She picked up his tie and pulled him towards her, and we were all standing back, amazed, gobsmacked. And the press officer, who was standing nearby, said, "God, I think I'll have to get a bucket of water and throw over them."
In 1991, Andrew Morton wrote detailed stories about Diana's marriage. They included strong hints about Charles and Camilla and were unusually well sourced.
For the first time, Diana had a voice, and trust was beginning to be built up between myself, Diana's circle, and, obliquely, Diana herself.
Morton had grown friendly with one of Diana's closest advisors, Dr. James Colthurst. In the spring of 1991, Colthurst invited Morton to join him for breakfast.
Over a plate of bacon and eggs in a transport cafe in North Ruislip in North London, well away from prying eyes, we just chatted about Diana's life.
Morton had been writing about Diana for some years, but Colthurst told him details that no journalist had heard before.
How she would run out of the room when Prince Charles arrived in the room. How she was in a bad way, mentally. And of course, the thing which really riled her most of all was that she was living a lie in terms of her marriage. And some of her friends really felt that she was on the verge of committing suicide. I remember thinking to myself, this is Walter Mitty land.
Morton was already planning to write a book about Diana. He and Colthurst discussed whether she would give him an interview. It was a risky idea. Diana liked it, but hesitated. And so Colthurst suggested that she consult a friend of his.
James Colthurst, who was a good friend of mine, at the time approached me out of the blue and said, how do you fancy doing an astrological reading for Diana? And I looked at him and I thought, you're winding me up, aren't you? But no, he meant it.
One afternoon, Diana came to James Colthurst's house for the first of 2 consultations with Felix Lyle.
Diana was thinking about doing a book, basically the revenge of the princess, and she wanted some astrological advice in it. There were doubts. She had serious worries and reservations about it. We talked through that, we talked about the possibilities and the mudslinging that would come out as a result of it. She asked me, well, what do you think? What are the auguries? I said, well, there's scandal here. Neptune was playing devious game, and also Pluto was playing a very strong role, and so there was complete transformation. In a way, she felt, well, if this is what's happening anyhow, I might as well facilitate it. And we smiled and said, well, that's it then. The book is going ahead. And I just think she wanted some form of external confirmation why she saw the stars as holding the secret to her. I don't really know.
If she'd come to somebody like me or others and said, do you think we should do this? Do you think this is a good idea? We would have all said no, or I would have done anyway, and that was not what she wanted to hear. So she went ahead anyway because she was an instinctive creature.
Andrew Morton sent Diana questions. During evenings alone, she responded, recording her answers on tape, her version of her unhappy marriage. She accused the royal family of disliking her popularity.
There was immense jealousy because every single day I was on the front of the newspapers.
She said she'd spent hours alone wondering where her husband was, causing her depression and bulimia.
I had so many dreams as a young girl that my husband would look after me, encourage me, but I didn't get any of that.
She accused Prince Charles of neglecting her and resuming his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles.
The worst day of my life, realizing that Charles had gone back to Camilla.
No royal writer had ever been handed such material, an attack on the character of the future king direct from his future queen. Every few days, Colthurst handed the tapes to Morton and returned with a fresh list of questions.
He said, I've got the whole thing rolling. The whole thing was rolling. The information was being gathered. She gave it a lot. James was the centrepiece. He was the linchpin for the whole thing. I mean, it was a very slick operation because Morton never had to meet her.
Recording tapes for Andrew Morton was not Diana's only unroyal activity.
And a car pulled up, and that's when it hit me. I thought, God, she's really coming to the house.
And I looked out the window and I could see her get out of a Jaguar, I think she had, yeah, XJS. And she come down the drive, and then she came in with her arms open. Gave my mum a hug, and hello, Ivy, first name terms. Hello, Ivy, hello, John, to my dad. And then she said, oh, I'm sorry I'm late.
I'm sorry I'm late, we got awfully low.
And she says to Dean, oh, it's nice to see you now you've got your clothes on. So we all had a laugh about that. She broke the ice. She didn't make you feel uncomfortable or anything. She'd been there half an hour, and outside the street was becoming crowded. You know, word had got round.
She was shocked to see that, because she didn't come for that. She came for me and my family. Not papers, not cameras, not public. I wasn't interested in the royals, but ever since Princess Diana did what she did for me and my family, I've not been a royalist, but I've definitely closed #1 Diana-ist if there was a Diana-ist. Definitely.
The Diana-ists were soon buying copies of the Sunday Times, which in June 1992 printed long extracts from Andrew Morton's book. Supporters of the royal family launched a counterattack.
I think the public have been outraged by the intrusive nature of the authors and the journalists concerned.
Andrew Morton knew that he was on his own. Diana would deny helping him.
She had total, utter deniability, so that I would take the flak for it. It would be my responsibility. Some of her friends would bear the burden of it as well, and that was it. And she could then say to the Queen, say to Prince Charles, say to the Prime Minister, nothing to do with me.
Palace officials passed on Diana's denials to the government and the press. Morton's book was soon being widely dismissed. Max Hastings, the editor of the Daily Telegraph, didn't believe a word of it.
Now, we're dealing here with a book by somebody called Andrew Morton, whose only credentials is that he was a royal reporter. Now, I'm bound to say that royal reporters, if you can't get a job as a pianist in a brothel, you become a royal reporter.
With the book facing ridicule, Diana decided she must publicly support it. She visited one of those whose help Andrew Morton had acknowledged, Caroline Bartholomew, and someone called the papers.
And I got a phone call saying the Princess of Wales is at Caroline's house. Caroline, one of Brook's flatmates. So I shot round there. The door opened up, sharp on 9 o'clock. Diana stepped out, looked up at me, kissed Caroline on both cheeks, kissed the baby, and kissed Caroline's husband. Looked up to see if I was shooting. Walked to the car and looked at me all the way up the street as she drove towards me, giving me a full chance to get more photographs.
The reason was very simple, to show the world that Diana gave support to those friends who'd stuck their neck out to speak to me.
It was significant that whoever told me was able to tell me when the Princess of Wales was leaving. Lots of people know when somebody's arriving someplace. It's very difficult to guess when somebody's leaving. Well, I only know who phoned me. And I'm not telling you.
This was the hinge of Diana's life. She had publicly endorsed an onslaught on the Prince of Wales. She had broken the most basic rule of the monarchy.
One of the things that really has made the royal family work over so many years is the discretion and the fact that their friends, they never talk to the media, and their friends never talk to them, and they are surrounded by this complete wall of loyalty and trust. And to have one of their own members with a regular hotline to Andrew Morton or whoever it was absolutely devastating for them.
In the book, which she had read in draft and approved, Diana painted Prince Charles as a selfish, lazy man who would rather play polo than spend time with his sons.
It had spite built into it, and I think in some way it satisfied her need for revenge. Part of me felt a little bit ashamed of that, actually, and I just felt that maybe I should have rethought my strategy originally.
As soon as Prince Charles's friends realised they could not dismiss Morton's book as ill-informed, they set out to rebut it detail by detail. Several contacted writer Penny Junor.
I think Morton's book is 100% credible as Diana's version of her story. I think it is 50%, maybe 99% inaccurate in terms of what actually happened.
Diana later backed away from some of the stories she had told Andrew Morton. In particular, Morton had published Diana's account of how at Sandringham, when 3 months pregnant with Prince William,
standing at the top of the wooden staircase, she hurled herself to the ground, landing in a heap at the bottom.
There was a part in the book about her trying to commit suicide, but she told me that she'd merely slipped and fallen down the stairs, and there was no suicide attempt at all. I'm sure of that.
I knew about the throwing down the stairs because I knew someone had witnessed it, so I knew that wasn't quite true.
Diana had launched the first open attack in a war of exaggeration and malice. It would soon escalate out of all control. As Diana and Charles fired broadsides at each other through the press, their supporters tried to find out what might appear next. Camilla Parker Bowles spoke regularly to The Sun.
We had a very civilised relationship over the phone. We met a couple of times. She really became a very, very, almost like an unofficial advisor, if you like, or unofficial shield to all the gossip. And I think in hindsight, and this is not any kind of insult to her, she got as much from me as I got from her, because every time I called her, I would tell her, well, you know, you've heard this, and this is incredible. And she would say, no, I've not heard that. And then she would say, well, it's totally untrue. And of course, everything was totally untrue.
I'll be on my bullet at you in a minute.
They were very aware of the rumours that the media had hold of, and really what newspapers were contemplating publishing about the marriage.
In August 1992, Stuart Higgins decided that so much was now known about the problems in Diana's marriage that it was safe to publish her taped conversation with James Gilby.
It's just so difficult, so complicated. He makes my life real torture.
Apart from some of the material at the beginning of the tape, which we thought was rather tasteless and offensive, we published every word and put it on a 0898 number for people to listen to as well.
Diana had recorded her story for Andrew Morton, partly to limit the damage the Gilby tape could do her. And she succeeded. In opinion polls, her popularity rating remained high. The Queen pressed the couple to make a final effort. But during an official tour to Korea, they made a gloomy pair. When they returned, it was all over.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce, and their constitutional positions are unaffected.
Between Charles's friends and Diana's, the divide now became total.
You were either in one camp or you were in the other. You couldn't really be in both. I can think of very few examples of those who were in both. And the tendency clearly was to drive the two people at the very centre of the drama apart.
Around London's most elegant dinner tables, a social war was raging. Lord Palumbo had been one of Charles's friends since the Prince was 16, but by now he was on the Princess's side.
Oh, the warfare is total in such circumstances. The warfare is very nasty and very deep and very bitter.
In public terms, there was supposed to be a dignified silence, but quite clearly the friends that the Prince had were very influential, had good contacts with the media. They took the opportunity to say that this was the Princess's fault. When I was told one day that the Princess is clinically mad and needs treatment.
The Princess was unbalanced, the Princess was this, the Princess was that, she was unstable, she was bulimic, she was so on and so forth. And similarly damaging things about the Prince of Wales and his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles.
In the aftermath of Andrew Morton's book, newspapers dug up more details about Prince Charles's affair. The Prince's circle issued an absolute denial to the press.
They are very close, but are nothing other than very good friends. It is Diana's obsession that makes it sound otherwise.
But then a man from Chester called the Daily Mirror. He too had a tape.
I can't bear a Sunday night without you.
Oh, come on. Trouble is, I need you several times a week.
So do I. I need you all the week. All the time.
The Mirror's publication of this tape proved that Diana's complaint about Camilla was not just an obsession.
Then you realise that actually Diana, far from being potty, her suspicions were absolutely correct, and that they had been arranging these meetings. They had been at friends, but people that she considered to be friends of her and Charles, who were playing a double game.
But it is highly appropriate that the conference should hear first from Turning Point's very active and involved patron, who will probably not mind if I describe her as one of us. A wife and a mother and a daughter and a friend and someone who's known problems in life of her own and has courageously used...
Diana became a symbol of the abused woman who had conquered despair and fought back. She addressed women's support groups, making speeches that hinted at personal experience.
As their world closes in on them, their self-esteem evaporates into a haze of loneliness and desperation as they retreat further and further from those who could help them.
The outside world also took Diana's side. Her solo visits drew far more attention than those of her royal relatives.
She was incredibly charismatic. I defy anybody to say they have met her and not been bowled over by the charisma that she just oozed.
Although Diana was semi-detached from the royal family, world leaders queued up to receive her. And she also charmed big business.
There was one particular case where a multinational whom I'd been trying to court for 6 years and not been very successful suddenly decided they'd like to support us. So she really had the ability to attract ordinary people people who were in positions of authority and the media, and that combination was dynamite for a charity.
Diana made numerous visits to New York, her new favourite city, where she was idolised by high society and the glossy magazines.
For Vanity Fair, Diana was, it's an icon of a period in time, an international symbol, the likes of which you get, maybe 3 or 4 times a century. Nobody knows anything about who does or doesn't sell, but when she was alive, she sold.
Diana was a superstar who, it seemed, could connect with anybody.
She'd stopped off for a night at the Carlisle Hotel in New York, got up to her room when the phone rang, and the switchboard said, "Is that the Princess of Wales?" "Yes." "Well, there's a man on the phone says he's your husband, and says he's calling from a payphone down the street. His name's Charles Windsor." And she took the call. And she'd clearly worked out that some enterprising figure on the street had seen her flit from limo to lobby and thought, "My God, was that who I thought it was?" Put through the call, and she had apparently a fascinating 40-minute conversation with whoever this was. And what she particularly liked, and we all laughed about enormously afterwards, was the fact that this guy would then reel into a bar and say, "You never guess who I've just been talking to on the phone." And everyone would say, "Yeah, and I'm the Queen of Sheba."
Diana's chilly relations with the palace made no difference to her popularity. Royal Ascot brought her no invitation, and so she drove her sons to Planet Hollywood. As her relatives rode in a carriage, Diana upstaged them once again. Charles's camp was planning to relaunch the prince. Charles helped reporter Jonathan Dimbleby make a 2.5-hour documentary about him. On the night the programme was shown on ITV, Diana set her video and went out to a Vanity Fair party at the Serpentine Gallery in London.
When her car drew up and she leapt out of it in the most amazing way and rushed up to me.
She looked fabulous, and nobody was going to talk about it, and I don't think anybody knew what he was going to say on TV that night.
Diana's hosts included a prominent critic of the royal family.
I went up to be introduced, so I said, "It's delightful to meet you, and we Republicans must stick together," and she laughed prettily. When large men closed in on me and said, "What on earth do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, she's done more to bring about a republic by apparently not trying than I ever have by trying, and I felt it was only fair to compliment her on it." She seemed to get the joke anyway.
She was the life and soul of the party, wearing this fabulous dress, which everybody noticed.
But it has occurred to me since that what she was thinking was, if I do this right, my ghastly hubby's interview with Dimbleby will not be on page 1 tomorrow, but I will be. "Di knocks 'em dead at Serpentine Bash," a kind of headline.
Diana returned to her video recorder to discover that in front of 14 million viewers, Prince Charles had admitted his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles.
Mrs. Parker Bowles is a great friend of mine, and she has been a friend for a very long time, and along with a lot of other friends, and will continue to be a friend for a very long time.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down. Us both having tried.
Charles's admission further damaged his popularity. Diana was still winning the War of the Waleses, but her husband's allies were about to launch a counterattack. As a confident, stylish princess was conquering the globe, in London, Prince Charles's friends and allies were describing her quite differently. They spoke in particular to 2 sympathetic writers, Penny Junor and Jonathan Dimbleby. Dimbleby, one of Britain's most respected television reporters, was now working on a book about Prince Charles, a book with impeccable sources, Charles's closest friends.
The friends were very protective of the prince and very distressed that he had been attacked by Diana when they had seen the way she had behaved.
Charles's friends gave Dimbleby dramatic and highly critical accounts of Diana's behaviour, mostly drawn from the early years of the royal marriage. They said she was obsessive, frightening and unhinged, that she listened at doors and steamed open letters.
When he was first told about the way Diana behaved, I think he did think, you know, I'm being told this by friends of the prince, and this marriage has broken down, and this is just one lot slagging off the other side.
Charles's friends told Dimbleby that Diana had shouted and had run out of the room, threatened her husband, raged at him.
Dimbleby did eventually come to believe what he was hearing.
Jonathan Dimbleby took his interview notes and consulted medical textbooks. There he learnt that the behaviour described to him suggested the symptoms of a psychiatric illness called borderline personality disorder. In a letter, he told the makers of this program,
I stumbled across the term borderline personality disorder in a variety of psychiatric journals while researching the symptoms of the princess's self-acknowledged condition, bulimia. I discovered that the two disorders are often associated with each other.
Dimbleby discussed Diana's alleged symptoms with two psychiatrists, but he did not reveal that she was the subject of his inquiries. One of the psychiatrists was Dr. Paul Aylard, brother of Prince Charles's own private secretary, Richard Aylard. Dimbleby then wrote a chapter for his book, arguing that Diana's behaviour was indicative of borderline personality disorder. But was Diana, so serene and accomplished on the international stage, really suffering from a mental illness? Her friends thought not, but even they saw that months of open conflict had changed her.
When she moved out of Highgrove, she found some of Prince Charles's possessions, and she had a bonfire, and she put them on the bonfire. She was very vengeful.
She was very wary of people. Very wary. If you weren't 100% for her, at her disposal, and to do what she wanted, when she wanted it, life could become very difficult.
Diana parted company with some close allies at this time. One was the man who had helped organise Andrew Morton's book, James Colthurst.
In the end, there was a parting of ways, and a painful one. So James became ostracised, he sort of became a pariah. He said that she used to refer to him as that, which I think is a great shame, really, and an end to a rather sad story.
But did Diana's displays of temper and mistrust mean that she was mentally ill? When it was published, Jonathan Dimbleby's book pointed firmly towards the conclusion that she was.
Her general demeanour seemed like something out of a nightmare, beyond all reason and out of control.
But Dimbleby did not go the whole way. After consultations with Prince Charles, he deleted all explicit references to borderline personality disorder from his book, and he dropped the chapter that focused on the disorder. He told this program,
I came to the conclusion that any conceivable link between bulimia and borderline personality disorder was too speculative.
But what Dimbleby had begun, others would take further. Penny Junor was one of the first to write in detail about Diana and borderline personality disorder.
Dimbleby helped me come to the syndrome. There were several people actually who had mentioned borderline personality disorder. Dimbleby was one of them. And when I then researched the subject further, I mean, I discovered that actually it was absolutely spot on for the kind of behaviour that Diana exhibited.
A psychiatrist and friend of Diana thinks otherwise.
In my 32 years as a consultant psychiatrist, I've treated many, many patients with borderline personality disorder. And it's a very serious, lifelong, pervasive condition. I met Princess Diana and I spoke to her, and she was able to perform extremely well in all areas of her life that the public knew about. And my professional opinion is it would not have been possible for her to meet with heads of state, to assume all these responsibilities that she did all over the world if she had a serious personality disorder.
I mean, I'm not a psychologist, I just know that she was in many ways, a very ordinary, natural person to be with. Yes, like everybody, she had her moments when she was upset, but she also regarded her work as a job, so that for 99% of the time she was able to handle her own feelings.
I think she learned to handle herself. And if you're going against the nasty boys, you've got to learn how to handle yourself. But I remember a kind, gentle, sympathetic, loving person who was changed by the position she found herself in.
You only have to say somebody's unbalanced or mentally unstable, and it's a dreadful thing to say, because even if it's not true, it sticks.
Another series of newspaper stories added to Diana's problems. James Hewitt had told his story to the writer of a bestseller called Princess in Love. Hewitt had been paid.
Yes, I was paid for an interview. I regret that very much. I don't see that it makes that much difference whether one was paid or not. The fact that I did it at all, I regret, and it was a mistake. Had one not made the mistake, for all probably the right reasons, but it was a mistake nevertheless, things would have panned out differently for me, I'm sure. You know, I tried to rectify a situation, and it went wrong. I don't think it's damaged anybody, particularly other than myself.
One evening in the autumn of 1995, a camera crew arrived in secret at Kensington Palace. For months, the papers had been filled with damaging stories about Diana's love life and her state of mind. She was beginning to lose public support, and so she had decided to use the most powerful medium in the world to settle her conflict with Prince Charles once and for all.
She won't go quietly, that's the problem. I'll fight till the end, because I believe that I have a role to fulfill. And I got 2 children to bring up.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Diana also responded to her critics. In the previous months, newspapers had reported that she had made obsessive phone calls to a married art dealer.
There were also a series of telephone calls which allegedly were made by you to a Mr. Oliver Hoare. Did you make what were described as nuisance phone calls?
I was reputed to have made 300 telephone calls in a very short space of time, which, bearing my lifestyle at that time, made me a very busy lady. No, I didn't, but that again was a huge move to discredit me, and very nearly did me in, the injustice of it.
Diana told me that she made probably 300 or 400 telephone calls to Oliver Hoare. She made them from phone boxes, from different addresses. She wore disguises to go to the phone boxes. She wore gloves, and she really covered her tracks, but she did make the phone calls. If he didn't answer the phone, she normally put the phone down.
Had you made any of those calls at all?
I used to, yes, I had rung up, yes.
Once, twice, 3 times?
I don't know, but it was a period of 6 to 9 months. A few times, but certainly not an obsessive manner, no.
She was actually worried that she might be arrested and charged with making nuisance calls.
The most devastating moment of Diana's interview came when she talked about her husband's future.
Do you think he would wish to be king?
There was always conflict on that subject with him when we discussed it. And I understood that conflict because it's a very demanding role, being Prince of Wales, but it's equally a more demanding role being king. And being Prince of Wales produces more freedom now, and being king would be a little bit more suffocating. And because I know the character, I would think that the top job, as I call it, would bring enormous limitations to him. And I don't know whether he could adapt to that.
It gave ammunition to those people who opposed her unnecessarily.
Good evening. So the Princess of Wales does not...
Newsnight had gathered together a group to discuss Diana's interview immediately after it was broadcast. She was represented by Anthony Holden and Charles by Government Minister Nicholas Soames, one of his closest friends.
I think we were all in our different ways thinking, well, she's not going to say anything very interesting.
Did your relationship go beyond a close friendship?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Wait a minute, did she just admit adultery with Hewitt?
Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him. But I was very let down.
My God, and this programme, for us as for everybody, moved into a different stratosphere. And when she came up with, well, I want to be Queen of Hearts, I want to be Queen of People's Hearts, Nicky Soames, by this time getting very indignant, said, I bet you wrote that, Holden. And sure, he let rip.
It really is the sort of advanced stages of paranoia. So she's made it all up. She's paranoid. I've simply an idea, but it seems to me like the advanced stages of paranoia.
Seeing him and hearing him say this publicly, I felt was a pretty important development. There he was going out on a limb on behalf of his prince. It seemed to me that this was the end game.
And I'm sure that those people who were advising the Prince of Wales said, I told you so. That's what she's all about.
After 2 years of gossip and exaggeration, this was the last straw. For Diana and Charles, divorce was now inevitable.
The princess talked to me on occasion about what might have been, and that prompted me to feel, perhaps wrongly, that there was some hope. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The two camps had become so entrenched and so deeply divided, and the feelings so bitter, that it was not possible to find any common ground.
In March 1995, Diana enjoyed a long weekend in the French capital.
We were staying in Paris, and Prince William and Prince Harry were there as well. And miraculously, we remained unobserved for 2 days, during which we had a wonderful time, because we were able to wander about completely incognito, go up the Eiffel Tower, do all the tourist things that, you know, everybody does. But after 2 days, the press spotted us. We were having breakfast at a wonderful shop called Dalloyau, and the princess insisted on sitting in the window. And sure enough, there were 2 members of the press outside. And she shut the curtains so they couldn't see her. And then finally she drew back the curtains so they could see her. It was a sort of cat and mouse peep show game that was going on.
For years, Diana had been protected by royal bodyguards. But she said she found their presence intrusive and wanted to get rid of them.
People like me always told her, don't be ridiculous, look what happened to Greta Garbo. You don't want to wind up in a headscarf hiding in doorways in Manhattan. There is no way, you know, you should not dispense with the protection officers.
But Diana was determined. And so instead of close protection, she got close-up photography.
it did get more aggressive for her, because there was no one to say, stand back, boys. And there was no one with that little hint of authority in her voice to make sure that if you didn't stand back, you were going to have your collar filled.
My God, the prices of the pictures was going through the roof. If Princess Diana is going to be photographed getting a bargain ticket, what else can we get? So suddenly, sitting on the Princess Diana's tail for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, became very much worth it.
There was one photographer in particular who used to really speak to the princess in the most appalling way. He talked about her as the loon, meaning she was crazy.
The photographer who coined the phrase was Mark Saunders.
As an in-joke, you would say, is it a loony lunch? Which would mean, what's the situation? Is it all clear today, or is she in a bad mood? And if the answer was, yep, it's Looney Tunes, that meant keep a low profile. It was genuinely a term of endearment, a laugh, an in-joke. She got into a taxi and put her head down between her legs. And one of the Spanish photographers said, why don't you put your head up and start acting like a princess? And I myself, as a photographer, was there, was part of that. And that's certainly not something I would look back on with any sort of pride.
Out. O-U-T, out.
Have a nice trip, man.
America was the only place Diana felt safe from press harassment. She said she felt at home there, and even talked of moving there to live. Her closest friend, Brazilian Lucia Flecha de Lima, had left London for America, and Diana was a regular visitor.
I really loved her as a daughter, and she was a most wonderful friend to me. She brought a lot of joy, of light, of laughter, of dramas into my life. She made me feel young again. She made me feel her age. We would share things.
Flecha de Lima believed Diana needed more support in America, someone else she could trust. Over a series of lunches, Lucia auditioned a potential confidant for the princess.
Over a period of about 9 months, Lucia told me quite a few controversial things that people could have sold to the tabloids and all sorts of things, and I think they tested me.
Discretion and reliability were the main qualities put to the test.
After that, Lucia called me up one day and said, would I consent to being the friend of the Princess of Wales? And I said to her I was deeply, deeply honoured, and that I would never let her down, and that I would be a loyal and terrific friend and always be there for her. And she said, Lana, we know an awful lot about you, and Diana will be so delighted.
Fashion designer and businesswoman Lana Marks, with her Hollywood and White House connections, moved in the same circles as Diana. And above all, she was completely trustworthy.
I would bring her for lunch, and we had a great variety of conversations. Some of them were very serious, and others were just two girlfriends having been to a charity event the night before and chatting about who was wearing what and who said what to who, and just a load of fun.
Back in London, while visiting a friend, a patient at the Brompton Hospital, Diana met his surgeon, Hasnat Khan. He had left his native Pakistan to study under Britain's leading heart specialist.
Diana told me that Hasnat Khan was a wonderful gentleman who came into her life when she was most vulnerable and needing somebody who could give her security, who could help her through this very difficult time when she was breaking up with Prince Charles.
The doctor hated publicity, and Diana went to great lengths to keep their relationship a secret.
She used to wear disguises, she used to wear wigs. And they went out all over the country. She went out to Ronnie Scott's club with Hasnat Khan, wearing a wig. She wasn't detected.
Some newspapers learned about Diana's secret life. but they didn't get the full story.
There was one particular occasion where she gave an exclusive to the Sunday papers to say that she'd been visiting patients at the Brompton Hospital. In fact, she hadn't spent the whole evening at the Brompton Hospital. She'd spent some of it at Hasna Khan's flat. And she told me, whatever happened, please don't say anything about it. So when I was asked about it, I said that, no, as far as I know, she'd spent the whole time at the Brompton Hospital.
Diana was in the midst of difficult divorce negotiations. She wanted the press on her side. So she hired a media advisor.
I'm absolutely delighted. I think it's going to be very difficult, but very good and hard work.
The situation when I arrived there in January '96 was that most of the journalists themselves didn't believe what she was saying, didn't trust, the messages that were put out, because she had tried to manipulate them too often.
Together, Diana and Atkinson launched a charm offensive on editors and writers.
Chatting with Diana was a revelation because she was very candid, surprisingly candid. She called Buckingham Palace the leper colony, and if you wanted to know what she thought about the Queen Mother, she called the Queen Mother the chief leper in the leper colony.
Diana went beyond nasty nicknames with Tiggy Leg Burke, the nanny Prince Charles employed to look after his sons. When Tiggy was spotted pouring champagne for Prince William at a school picnic, Diana instructed her office to brief the press.
We ran a story about what the princess had said about Tiggy Leg Burke, and the next day she went completely potty and said, "I'd never said that." Her aides rang up, and they had clearly been told by the princess, "Get on the phone there and give that Higgins bloke a bollocking now." And they were in the invidious position of having to say, that is totally untrue. The princess can't understand why you wrote that. You know, you met her, you've seen her, and all that. And I said, "But you know it's true. You told me."
Let's go. 3 months into the job, I realised that it was not perhaps as easy as I thought it was going to be. My client was far more mercurial than I had thought.
Diana's work with AIDS sufferers had established her reputation as a humanitarian. She agreed to open a new AIDS clinic, but then she met Aileen Getty, the daughter of the American billionaire John Paul Getty Jr.
I got into the department and found a message to say that Diana had decided that she was going to bring Aileen Getty. Now, Aileen Getty was a high-profile American with HIV and AIDS who had just hit London, was travelling around every television and radio studio in the capital talking about HIV and AIDS, had latched on to Diana. Diana was bringing her and Aileen Getty's entourage.
She, through meetings with Aileen Getty, was persuaded that this was a huge opportunity to broaden the objective, to draw attention to women and AIDS.
So I can remember ringing up Jane Atkinson and going bananas down the phone, sort of saying, "It's not a zoo. She can't just bring all these people in. These are patients that we're dealing with."
And he was very angry, and he did shout at me down the telephone as to how I could have allowed this. So I told him to speak to her directly.
Diana came on and I said, "Mum, listen, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter to me whether you come or not, OK? It really doesn't matter, but I'm not having you treating us in this way. I'm quite happy to call it all off now." She said, "Oh, Michael, you must trust me. It'll all be all right." Anyway, she arrived, and we had got the whole thing worked out. Aileen Getty would be sort of taken by one of us, sat at the back of this room, Diana sitting in the front. I got up, having sat next to Diana, and Diana went like that to Aileen Getty. Aileen Getty came from the back of the room to the front of the room.
The princess motioned Aileen to sit very close to her. She held hands with Aileen all the way through, and that was the photograph that got used.
This was Diana's last appearance for the charity. She had lost the trust of Britain's leading AIDS specialist.
Because she was trying to sort so many other things out in her life, she became distracted by that. It became very difficult to know that she would deliver on things that you would ask her to do. To be quite honest, by the end of her life, we hardly asked her to do anything. It just wasn't worth it.
In July 1996, the divorce was settled. The removal of Diana's title, Her Royal Highness, sparked massive press attention. A day later, she cut her ties with 100 charities, keeping only 6. Diana had been planning her move for months.
I don't think that I and her staff ever thought there was a good time for her to do it. We always knew that it was going to be a negative media story. She tried, I think, to do it as a story which would give her some sympathy for losing the HRH title.
Some newspapers followed Diana's line, but most didn't.
She was very angry because the media had been very negative to her. And I explained that I had only answered the questions in the way that we'd agreed. And she said that, accused me of not doing so. And then one of her friends was on the 10 o'clock news.
Earlier, Diana's close friend Rosa Monckton spoke exclusively to ITN about how the princess was feeling.
We rang Rosa Monckton, and surprisingly she said, well, I'll ring you back. And I thought, oh, there's only one thing happening there. She must presumably be going to check with the princess. She did ring back quite quickly. I think it was about 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, and agreed to do the interview.
She would like to be much more in the front line, I suspect, with fewer charities and do a lot more.
When I rang the princess and asked her if she knew her friend was on the news, she said, no, she didn't know, but you can't, I think her words were, you can't always stop your friends talking. But then I discovered afterwards, her friend had actually talked to the princess about it. So it was, you know, it's impossible for me to do my job in an environment like that, and I came quite clearly to see that.
After only 8 months, Jane Atkinson quit, the latest in a series of advisors to resign. In the face of difficulties at home, Diana increasingly turned away from Britain, both for her personal and her public life. She was a fixture on the American charity scene, where her presence guaranteed flattering press coverage and huge donations. New York society turned out to attend a dinner at which the princess was to receive the Humanitarian of the Year award.
There were any number of celebrities in this town who actually had offered to up their donations. I mean, there's one gentleman who offered to up his donation from, he used to buy a $10,000 table at our dinner, and asked if he could donate $50,000, but the caveat was that he had to sit next to the princess on the dais, which we declined, actually. The evening wore on, and Dr. Kissinger gave the princess her award. And what she talked about was not herself or the organization, but what it meant to be a volunteer.
I think of the parents who this very night are standing around a hospital bed, not knowing if their child will wake in the morning.
And a woman actually who was sitting in the audience somewhat near me, much to my dismay, actually yelled out to her, "Where are your children, Diana?" At that moment, a hush came over the crowd, and she simply looked to the back of the room and said,
"At school."
And proceeded on with the rest of her speech, for which she got a standing ovation.
Diana's grace under pressure was one reason she was such a solid gold fundraiser.
In a jaded world, you're always looking for somebody that's just trying to go out and make a difference. Our average dinner probably averaged $1.2 million. That night our dinner was $2.2 million. And we've never come close to it since, nor do I expect to.
Diana could generate charities an extra $1 million an evening, but she wanted more, an official role. She approached the Prime Minister, John Major.
Diana wanted to be an ambassador for the United Kingdom. She invited John Major to discuss it with him, and he agreed it would be a good idea.
Shortly after their discussion, Diana attended a meeting of Centrepoint, a charity for the homeless, to make a speech.
She had a huge goggle factor. You know, people wanted to see her, and that in itself meant that she could head up an organisation like Centrepoint.
I'm appalled at the dangers young people face on the streets and how vulnerable they are to exploitation.
Diana shared the platform with an opposition MP, the Shadow Home Secretary, Jack Straw. She found herself at the centre of a political storm.
It became a huge furore. It was talked about in the Houses of Parliament, and Centrepoint's name was... We'd politicised the royal family, apparently, by actually getting her to talk about youth homelessness.
Well, over now to our political editor, Michael Brunson. Michael, is there some anxiety that she's something of a loose cannon?
There's a great division tonight among Tory MPs and among some Labour MPs too, and Liberal Democrats as well, about exactly how the Princess is going to go forward from this point onwards.
Just 2 days before, the Queen had discussed Diana's ambassadorial role with John Major.
He had to get permission from the royal family, and they blocked it. And I was there on the morning that she got a fax saying that unfortunately she couldn't be an ambassador for the United Kingdom. And she was absolutely furious. She was really, really cross. She started screaming and said, "I can't understand why they treat me like this."
But Diana would not be thwarted. When she learned the Red Cross was conducting a worldwide campaign to ban landmines, she asked if she could visit Angola, the most mined country in the world.
She did call me to say, what should she wear? I have to say I found that highly amusing, as even my wife wouldn't ask that question of me, but I told her what I was going to wear. I mean, chino trousers and an open-neck shirt, and that the staff with me would be wearing the same kind of thing, because we were going into some pretty dirty, some pretty awful places.
The welcoming party included experienced war reporters.
I was very cynical about Diana, and I thought the trip was important because I'd worked a lot as a correspondent covering the issue of landmines in Mozambique and Angola, which her trip was meant to highlight. But I just saw it as a big publicity stunt, another chance for her to be photographed in front of victims looking beautiful.
It's an enormous privilege for me to have been invited here to Angola in order to assist the Red Cross in its campaign to ban once and for all anti-personal landmines.
Diana's call for a worldwide ban upset a member of the British government. Once again, she found herself at the centre of a political row.
Ma'am, the government minister's home has said you're a loose cannon by supporting this campaign. Do you have any reaction to that?
Well, Jenny, I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all.
Her reaction was really one of astonishment. I mean, why is this being said? Why are people wanting to do this? What do I have to do?
So that was...
Oh, I really make you burst into tears now.
Don't worry.
Who said I'm a loose cannon?
If you try and think, who in the world would you identify who could give a very simple global message and get people to listen and take notice? Well, I can't think of anybody even now that would do that. Not a single individual. And she did it on that visit without any question whatsoever.
Diana's visit increased pressure on governments to sign up to a worldwide treaty. banning landmines.
Angola is probably one of the few places she could go to, and people really had no idea who she was. She went to some of the bedsides, and I actually interpreted for her because I speak Portuguese.
What's happened here?
And there was a little girl lying who was clearly in a terrible condition. All her insides were hanging out, and she caught the attention of Princess Diana, who started asking her questions.
That's right. So that's why presumably she's lost the weight that she has. She's lost the weight because she can't take in nutrition.
I think that's enough.
She eats, but...
After she'd moved on, I stayed and just asked the girl a few more questions. And she said to me, "Who is that?" And I said, "She's a princess from England, from far away." And she said to me, "Is she an angel?" And I found that really moving. This little girl probably died a few hours after that. I know she died. And it somehow seemed nice that that was the last thing that she saw, was this beautiful lady that she thought was an angel. She had this kind of aura about her, which I've only seen really, I would say, with Nelson Mandela. She somehow managed to transmit to them this feeling of really caring what had happened. It didn't seem cynical at all once you were actually there with her. I was very impressed. It changed my view of her.
In May 1997, Diana arrived in Pakistan. Her trip was ostensibly to visit the cancer hospital run by her friend, Imran Khan, and his British wife, Jemima. But her real reason was to meet the family of her lover, Hasnat Khan.
I think she would have come anyway, but also I think she felt that it was a good chance, a good opportunity to meet Dr. Hasnat's family. She'd been involved with him for 2 years, and Princess Diana wanted to marry him. And she really, she had decided that he was the man.
But Hasnat's family were divided, and he refused to commit to Diana.
She went from great joy to great despair. Sometimes she said, "Oh God, it's never going to work. He doesn't want to see me anymore."
I had it in my mind that I was going to talk to him, because having married someone from outside my culture, maybe if there was something that could be cleared, or if there was some advice that could be given, maybe I would be able to help.
But before Imran Khan could act, Diana went to Saint-Tropez on the French Riviera. She'd been invited to the home of the Egyptian businessman and owner of Harrods department store, Mohammed Al-Fayed. He had been refused a British passport and claimed he'd bribed several British politicians. Diana arrived on the 11th of July, followed a day later by the press.
We were all together in the same place, all lined up like a photo call, just like at the Cannes Festival. And in front of us, a performance would begin every day at about the same time, at about 11 o'clock. Diana jumping in the water, diving, jet skiing, in a swimming costume, not hiding herself, right in front of us. Well, the whole thing was just extraordinary, I can tell you. I'd never seen anything like it.
She came over to our boat determined to have a say. I remember she saying, "No photographs, no photographs." And she said, first things, "How long are you going to be here?" And told her, and she said, I don't want to live abroad like my boys want me to. And I thought, oh God, we're going to drive this woman away. And then she did an amazing thing. She went to the edge of the jetty, did a most beautiful dive into the sea, and swam around, laughing and as though she was having a wonderful time. It was one of the most bizarre things.
Diana's show for the cameras coincided with the 50th birthday party of Camilla Parker Bowles.
Camilla Parker Bowles heading for her birthday celebrations at Prince Charles's Highgrove home. A party going on now, at which there'll be no attempt to keep secret the loving relationship between Charles and Camilla.
Diana told me at the time that she was really hurting about this. It did affect her. I think it has more to do with her hurting inside and showing that she was having a good time.
That same day, Al-Fayed summoned his son to join the princess. Dodi Al-Fayed was a 42-year-old part-time Hollywood film producer. The photographers mistook him for a bodyguard. In Saint-Tropez, one restaurant owner welcomed the group.
Il a dit, tout le monde est parti, sauf Diana.
He told me everyone left apart from Diana and her bodyguard. They left 5 or 10 minutes later. They left holding hands, climbed into the car, and drove off. I said, with her bodyguard? He said, well, yes, with her bodyguard. After all, she's a grown woman, and if she wants to go out with her bodyguard, then she can do as she likes.
Diana returned home to a watershed meeting with Hasnat Khan.
Diana told me that her relationship with Hasnat Khan was not going to go any further. And she said, I can't just sit home at Kensington Palace, Lana, and watch the four walls. I'm a young person. I need to get out.
At the end of July, Diana went back to the Mediterranean. Only this time she was on her own with Dodi Al-Fayed.
Here was a gentleman who was giving her a very good time. He was attentive. She was having a lovely summer in beautiful circumstances in the south of France.
Dodi Al-Fayed was simply a rebound situation. Calculated, I suppose, to upset Hasnat Khan, the person she'd been seeing. I think it was simply a summer fling.
4 days into the cruise, this photograph was taken. Someone close to the princess had called a top celebrity photographer, Jason Fraser, and told him where and with whom she would be. After 2 years of dodging the press with Hasnat Khan, this was one relationship Diana made no attempt to hide. During the cruise, Diana was called by Lana Marks. They had arranged to go to the Italian lakes together in late August. But Lana's father died suddenly.
I called Diana and told her of my very sad news and that unfortunately I wouldn't be able to go away on vacation with her. But this left her with the free week at the end of her summer. And when Dodi asked if she would come back to the south of France, she agreed.
As Diana and Dodi cruised around the Mediterranean, Jason Fraser was once again tipped off about their whereabouts. Only this time, the calls came from Diana herself. She asked him, "Are you getting this? What did you get just now? Why are the pictures so grainy?" Diana also called her friends and gave them different accounts of the relationship.
Diana told me she was very happy with Dodi Fayed. I think she felt that she might have found a new family, and that's something that she always missed, family life. I think she could have got married, and it could have been the fairy tale ending that she wanted.
Diana told me that her summer was coming to an end now, and she had asked for an earlier flight back to London to return 2 days earlier because she'd had enough.
But Dodie persuaded Diana to stay on, and on the 30th of August, they flew to Paris. The couple spent the day in frenetic car journeys across the city.
The word was out that the princess was around. That was the most aggressive sort of paparazzi we'd seen throughout the whole of the summer.
Dodie arranged a romantic night out. But the photographers laid siege to his Paris flat, and Dodie kept changing his plans.
When we left that evening, myself and Kes still didn't know the venue that they were leaving to.
You know, tempers were getting a bit short. It was very close that somebody was going to get injured.
The couple finally decided to dine at the Ritz Hotel, owned by Dodie's father.
The pressure was growing because of the number of paparazzi around. Dodie was angry and the princess was shaken up about the whole thing, I think.
She was crying, and I think because she was upset was the main reason why Dodie flashed up at us. He said, how the f*** did you let this fiasco happen? And I didn't lose my temper, but I told him in the strongest terms that it wouldn't have happened if he'd have told us where we were going.
Dodie brought in a new driver, the hotel's deputy head of security, Henri Paul. Dodie planned that they would slip out the back of the hotel unnoticed.
We'd gone to the back and there was a very happy atmosphere there. We were laughing and joking. We walked out. And Henri Paul went to the driver's side and changed seats with the person who brought the vehicle around.
According to the subsequent French investigation, Henri Paul was drunk. The photographers were soon in hot pursuit. Henri Paul made a fateful decision. He avoided the direct route to Dodie's flat. Instead, he accelerated along the riverside and left the photographers behind. He raced into the Alma Tunnel and lost control. At midnight, the car slammed into a concrete pillar.
French police say Diana, Princess of Wales, has been seriously injured and her companion Dodie Al-Fayed killed in a road accident in the French capital, Paris. The driver of their car said to be...
Dodie and Henri Paul died instantly. Diana and Dodie's bodyguard, Trevor Rhys-Jones, were grievously injured. The French Interior Minister and his aide were waiting at the hospital when the ambulance carrying Diana pulled in.
The minister was on one side and I was on the other. We lifted her out. We pulled the stretcher out. The princess had an oxygen mask on her face, and she had bruising under her eyes. And at that time, of course, she was still breathing.
At 4 a.m, the doctors emerged from the operating theatre.
En fait, je comprends quand les...
I realized what was happening after 2 hours. The doctors who were trying to revive her, the emergency team, the heart specialists, they came out. Then I knew it was all over.
He gave a little sign to the minister, and the minister went out. I followed him, and he said to the minister, "She's dead."
We watched the news coming up. It seemed to strike everybody connected with it. I had photographers too stunned to speak on the phone. I had a little girl come in. I'd phoned someone and got a girl to come in and help me on the desk. She was useless. Poor girl just cried for 5 hours.
Within an hour of Diana's death, 6 photographers had been arrested.
The story began to come back that she'd been pursued by photographers. I felt ill at the thought of this. And I felt guilt and sadness.
At Balmoral, the royal family were thrown into turmoil.
I was told by 2 sources, one royal, one ministerial, that there was a tremendous breakdown between the Charles camp and the Queen's camp. The Queen did not want Diana's body to go to any royal palace, royal chapel. She wanted it left at an undertaker's. Charles, driven by the boys, wanted a proper royal send-off and all the protocol to kick in. The whole thing deteriorated into the most appalling slanging match, which at one point found Charles shouting at Sir Robert Fellows, Diana's own brother-in-law, the Queen's secretary, "Why don't you just go and impale yourself on your own flagstaff?" An extraordinary phrase. And another royal official saying, "Well, what would you rather, ma'am, that she be taken away in a Harrods van?"
8 hours after Diana died, the royal family set off for Sunday church. As always, since the divorce, Diana's name was left out of the royal prayers. Outside Buckingham Palace, the first signs of the extraordinary public reaction to Diana's death. As Prince Charles left for Paris, the Queen was still refusing her former daughter-in-law all royal privileges.
The row continued even while Charles was in the air, because denied royal protocol, he now had to find some way of getting all the things which protocol would normally have provided. What kind of a coffin, the provision of flowers, guard of honour, flags, all the rest of it. And he was now having to call on the government, and there was effectively an open line from the flight deck to number 10.
The only thing that mattered to him from start to finish was concern for the Princess of Wales. Little details. We couldn't find one of her earrings, and he kept saying, "No, she can't go without her second earring." Little things like that. You could tell he was really, really distraught, completely shattered.
There was still a row burning as the plane was coming back as to where the body was actually going to go. The Queen pretty sure now that she'd got her way and that it was going to go straight to the Fulham Road undertakers, and Prince Charles determined to get it to St James's Palace to lie in the Chapel Royal there. The government was being asked to provide for both eventualities. But in the end, Charles got his way.
In the streets around the palaces, anger was building against the royal family. Many blamed them for expelling Diana. The lack of a half-mast flag over Buckingham Palace was taken as a sign of the Queen's unwillingness to mourn.
Now, I know it's tradition that the flag flies at Buckingham Palace when only the royalty are there, but I really would have liked to have seen the flag flying half-mast there as well.
I think they treated her terrible, absolutely shocking. I don't think they're the most cold people on this earth.
A woman came up to me and said, "Oh, you're that chap from the telly. Can I just tell you this? Why isn't the Queen here? That's what I want to know. Why isn't the Queen here?"
I think it's disgraceful that they're not here in residence, and I think most people I've been speaking to this morning have said exactly the same thing.
And I went back to the studio, to my ITN studio, and told my bosses about all this, and their reaction was exactly the same as I know newspaper editors' reaction was. This is dangerous stuff.
On Thursday, 4 days after Diana's death, newspapers took up the charge.
There was a meeting to discuss the funeral at which senior police officers were present and royal officials. A senior police officer at that meeting, I am told, expressed the view that the Prince of Wales would be booed or worse if he was to turn up in London at such a sensitive time.
The following day, the Queen returned.
There were real worries, according to my ministerial source, about what kind of a reception the Queen was going to get. The worry was things would be thrown, and people would jeer or shout or abuse her. And so the decision was taken that they should do it as near the gates of Buckingham Palace as possible, so that an escape existed if anything went wrong. My royal source says that even the Queen was worried about what kind of a reception she was going to get. There was real fear that she's never previously experienced in her reign.
But would the Queen now respond to the people's will?
First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys.
As the day of the funeral dawned, more than 1 million people lined the route.
I'm picking my way through these crowds and bumping into this friend of mine who I'd not seen for a good few months, and always thought he was a bit of an anti-royalist, really. Certainly his position was, well, you know, take it or leave it, and, you know, what's it to me kind of thing. And there he was, with his mother, with a tent, you know, on the pavement, kipping out, and I'm like, you know, what are you doing here? And he just said, well, you know, we had to come. And I thought to myself, she probably would have liked that. That would have made her smile.
And finally, breaking with royal tradition, a flag flew at half-mast over Buckingham Palace.
All over the world, she was a symbol of selfless humanity. A very British girl who transcended nationality. Someone with a natural nobility who was classless, and who proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic.
The applause, which erupted outside Westminster Abbey and quickly spread inside, was a reminder that for years Diana had battled against the royal establishment. She had at times been vindictive and erratic, but millions worldwide mourned Diana for her compassion and her courage, qualities which in a short but dazzling life she had so often displayed at their best.
Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman I'm so proud to be able to call my sister. The unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana, whose beauty, both internal and external, will never be extinguished from our minds.